The Silly Goose Gang Podcast.
So we are back in, folks, episode 65 of the Silly Goose Gang Podcast, and we're delighted to be joined by double Guinness World Record holder, Dean Stott. So, Dean, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon, your time, and this evening over here in Scotland.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's always a privilege. In fact, we very rarely get to speak to any UK military guys for whatever reason. We've spoken to so many SEALs. It's always a privilege to speak to our own guys. So, yeah, thank you. I was listening to you earlier on, the Jocko Jocko episode. So I guess you went into the studio because you're in California now.
So I think I broke the mold there. I became, he's used to interviewing American military veterans, and I was the first British veteran that he'd interviewed. But he's only down in San Diego. I'm in Orange County, so about an hour's drive. So it worked perfect geographically.
I think this will be, Ali will know better than me. I think you'll be our fourth guest that's been on Jocko.
Oh, really? Wow.
I think that's right. Joel Struthers, Jason Gardner, and Iris Gardner. That'd be right.
Yes.
Now you.
Yep. Absolutely.
Is it as intimidating as it seems?
Yeah, well, I won't lie. I didn't know who Jocko was until I landed here. I got introduced to Jocko through a mutual friend. So actually one of Jason Gardner's friends. So sort of going back, my ghostwriter for my book is a good friend of mine, Jez Jones, who runs a podcast called Veteran State of Mind. And he's got a lot of American contacts. So he introduced me to a guy called Mike Sorrell, who's running Echelon Front, which Jocko's part of, and the Talent War Group. So as soon as I had boots on ground here in October, I got introduced to Mike. We started chatting. He was just about to launch the Talent War Group and had numerous characters and individuals from all over the US military, but I had no one from the UK. So it was a perfect fit and just at the right time. And I know Jason Gardner's part of that group as well.
Yeah.
And I told him my story, what I'd been through and what I was doing. And he said, I must get you on Jocko's podcast. And I was like, yeah, I didn't even know who Jocko was. So I then started following him. And then told a couple of people that I'll be going on Jocko, and they said, oh, he's intense. I was that. But I didn't listen to any of his before. I listened to one, I lie actually. I listened to one a couple of days before. I think it was with Pat McNamara. Someone said, well, listen to this one. So I listened to that, and it gave me a bit of a feel for Jocko. But actually, Jocko, he comes across intimidating, his voice, and he stamps that knife into the table and things like that. But actually, he was a gentleman, really, and it was a really good interview. And obviously, goes on for a while though. It was about 3.5 an hour interview. When you're used to podcasts back in UK, they're 45 minutes to an hour, because that used to be the commuting time, so it was the perfect time for a podcast. Whereas in America, 3.5 hours, 4 hours is the norm, which was good because you touched on, I have my book Relentless, there's stories in there from my time in the military, and then I've been on podcasts before, but he went right back to the beginning, and, he had that time to ask questions that hadn't been asked before as well. So it was good, and it just flowed really well. And, and I got a great response. I think it was on something like nearly 760,000 downloads now on YouTube or something. And a lot of people messaging saying it was probably one of the best Jocko ones as well. So, it was good, but I didn't psych myself out. I didn't get myself intimidated by him because I didn't actually know who he was
I think that having listened to, I'd listened to Joel Struthers, is, I guess he's kind of a friend of ours now as well. He was a French Foreign Legionnaire guy. And, he had been on and he seemed a little stiff to begin with, but he obviously knew who Jocko was. So he was a little stiff until he got warmed up. Whereas you didn't, you were just,
I think I think, you go in there a little bit of apprehension because, the potential reach he has and who he is. But, when I met him outside the gym, Echo pulled up, then Jocko pulls up, and then, Jocko comes in and it's like big high five, big man hug, and you're like, all right, yeah, this guy's relaxed. It's a relaxed theme. There's no egos, there's no attitude. And he's very good at what he does. And then Echo as well, great having Echo there, being a non-military guy, because he will ask questions that he may not understand. And I think what was unique on the interview with them is that our terminology in the British is very different to the American terminology, either as civilians, but also in the military, we have almost a different language. So it was quite good. I think when Jocko pronounced Bournemouth, he said Bournemouth. It's like as you read.
There was a point.
His wife's British. His wife's from Yorkshire.
Oh, is he?
Oh, yeah. His wife's from Yorkshire. He knows much about the British.
Ah, right, okay. Because you said at one point, I can't even remember. You'd said something about being back on Civvy Street, and I went, does Jocko know what Civvy Street is? Would that make any sense to him? But yeah, it was. I've only listened to about an hour and 20, or maybe an hour, just over an hour so far. But yeah, it was good. So, going. There's something I don't. Maybe they touched on it later on, but going back to the beginning. So if you grew up in an army family, and lived in Aldershot, and I know you were talking about getting into some scuffles, but you must have been introduced to the boxing in Aldershot.
Yeah,
in the army.
No, only through the Maida gym where the army boxing team is. Yeah. My dad used to, on Wednesday evenings, he used to run. It was almost like a kids club.
Right.
It was at the Maida gym. So, you'd have five-a-side football, there'd be trampolines there, there'd be all sorts of sports, and my dad would sort of coordinate that. So I knew of the Maida gym, but my memories of Maida gym were being a child playing sports there. When I joined 5'9 Commando, I joined the boxing team there, and we were the Army Minor Unit champions. So each year, because we'd win, we'd automatically go through to the final. We didn't need to fight off any more teams. But the final was always held in the Maida gym in Aldershot. So that was the first time really I saw it as a boxing arena rather than actually somewhere as a child I was growing up. So I wasn't really introduced to milling or things like that. As a touch on, my father then sent me to school in North Camp, when all my friends went to a school in Aldershot called Connaught, which was where most of the military kids tended to sort of naturally progress to. I think my father was looking at getting out the military. He was towards his end of his career. So he wanted to almost take me out of that environment and start introducing me to just civilian kids, really, kids whose parents have no association with the military. But being and he's from Montrose, my old man. He's a Scotsman. So he's being an old school Scottish sergeant major, he thought, secondary school, you've got to make an impression. It's all about making first impressions. And as I touched on in Jocko's, I turned up day one wearing a blazer with a leather briefcase. I was like, oh my God, like that geezer from In-Betweeners. They just brought so much attention to me. Unwanted attention. So I got into trouble a bit there fighting. But my dad was old school. It was, and that's where I because I know Jocko and even now a lot of people in this Brazilian jiu-jitsu, as a child, my old man said, look, once they're down, they're down. That's it. You don't do anything else. And I've always, it's the old school way of boxing is that you, So, I remember when I got suspended, my dad's like, right, did you hit them when they were down? I said, no, because you told me not to. He's like, yeah, good. Rather than addressing the fact why I was actually in a fight, because you dressed me like. So I did mention it to him. Can I wear another jacket and maybe get a school bag? And he's like, yeah.
You have an old school army guy from Montrose. He'll be a hard man.
Yeah, very much a hard man. And I met a few people in my career who knew him. So my father was the Army football manager, player and coach. So he had a great reputation within the Army as a football player. And so and Stott's not a common surname at all within the military. There's not that many Stotts. I don't think I've come across another one. There's one actually I've come across since. And so a lot of people in the same cap badge, Royal Engineers, oh, you must be Davy Stott's boy. And I was like, yeah. So automatically you're either, been tarnished with his history. He's either upset someone or, they've met him through sport. So when I joined, they're like, my first posting was to Germany because they were the Army football champions. So like, well, you're Davy Stott's boy. And that's what I did. I went out to Germany for my first posting to 2-8 Engineer Regiment. But soon identified I wanted to carve my own path. I didn't want to just follow my dad's footsteps as well. So so there's pros and cons of being associated with him. I remember in basic training, you go through, and I think on week, it's 10-week basic training. I think on week 5, you write a letter home, inviting your parents to your passing out parade. And so that's what I did. I wrote a letter home, and they reply. My dad, I'd kept it quiet that my dad was in the military. And next thing, all I hear is Stott, getting screamed from the office. I ran down there in like my little tracksuit, and they're like, he never told us your dad was in the Engineers. So my father got the British Empire Medal, so he'd signed it, D Stott BEMRE, which then just exposed that he was in the Engineers. So of course my training instructor's like, well, you never told us. I was like, oh, you didn't really ask. And then he started thinking, he's like, hang on. He said, your dad's Scottish? I said, yeah. He said, your dad jailed me when I was in training. I was like, over the next 5 weeks, I spent my life in the press-up position. So, it's one of them ones.
Yeah, those things go either, one or two ways. It either works in your favour or people fucking punish you because of something. It's like they'll get it back on you for whatever reason. But yeah, that's quite. Did you ever find out why you put him in jail?
No, I didn't find out why, but obviously. But my dad was fair but firm. Everyone I spoke to, he wasn't. You get some of these sergeant majors who have egos and attitude with it. He wasn't like that. He was very fair but firm that I heard from him. And he was one of the lads, and he's quite funny. My dad, because he knew he was quite fit. So as a sergeant major at Gibraltar Barracks, which was just outside Camberley, he used to do a BFT, a basic fitness test, which is a 1.5 mile run on a Friday. And he used to say to the squadron that anyone who comes behind me doesn't go home for the weekend. And my dad was quite fit, although he's getting old. And he used to just shoot off, and he could see in everyone's faces like, oh my God, just see their weekend disappearing. But what he used to do, he used to get to the halfway point, and then he'd sort of slow it up and start letting them pass. But yeah, he used to play mind games with them as well. But a bit of a character.
Yeah, that's yeah. I love those stories of those crazy old guys who like to punish people. But yeah, what that actually just because you talked about 1.5 miles, what's the military's 1.5 mile time? This is only purely because I had to do it recently in a training session, 1.5 mile time. And I was just wondering, what is the military's? Is there a special forces 1.5 mile time?
No, there isn't. No, I think it's sort of changed over the years. When I joined, you basically you run 1.5 miles with the PTI, and you've got to do that in 15 minutes. So he'll jog you out, walk you, jog you out, and then you get to the turnaround point at 15 minutes, and then you've got individual best effort. You've got to then do 1.5 miles back, and there used to be certain time for certain age groups, but for me it was all as fast as you could. I remember doing my first ever one just before basic training down in Purbright, and I just ran because I'd never done 1.5 miles before, so I couldn't even gauge what 1.5 miles looked like, and I just sprinted and the lungs were coming out of my mouth, and I did it in about 8 minutes 30, and this PTI was like, you'll never do that again. But I used to always say when I was in the military, I was like, oh, because as long as you get in a certain time, you've passed.
Yeah.
For me, it was almost about giving my 100%. And I used to say, oh, I'm going to take it easy today. I mean, you just see some whip it go off, and you're like, all right, I'll try and catch him. But it's good for runners, but that's the basic fitness test. You have the combat fitness test, which is you need to march 8 miles in 2 hours carrying a certain amount of kit. I mean, there's all these other additional exercises off there. They're the basic standards. And then if you go commandos, paras, SF, they have their own tests on top of that. But I think that's a baseline for the military, so you know where you are fitness wise. I remember going out to Germany when I was playing football, and I ended up being a PTI out there. And where they did their BFT, you ran out as the PTI to the turnaround point, and then you had to run back with them, and you had to beat them all in, to take their times. So there was no pressure, but there was I can't remember his name now. There's a lad who was like an army or tri-service, like cross-country runner. He was a Scottish boy as well, but he was an alcoholic, and he just smoked like a chimney. But he could do it in something like 6 minutes 50, which is unheard of. My fastest ever was like 7 minutes 10. So all I used to do with him is I'd just give him the stopwatch. he'd go back and clock his time, and then probably I would come second and then start clocking everyone else in. But
that's super fast.
Oh yeah, no, he was. His name will come to me soon. But yeah, a whip it, but couldn't pull his body weight up for shit. You know what I mean? He couldn't get himself up a rope or a pull-up bar. You know what I mean? But perfect, perfect running machine.
Perfect for running.
That's super fast. 7:10 for that time. That's fast.
Yeah, well, my 7:10 actually, I did that when I was 28 years old. I didn't do it when I was younger. So I was an instructor in the All Arms Commando course in 2001, and I went on Special Forces selection after that because I was quite fit. But my training for selection at that point, I was running up and down mountains along the North Devon coastal path, carrying weight on my back, because that's what everyone had done before me. So when I got on selection, I already had a slight knee injury, and then that aggravated, and then I tore my lateral meniscus. So I ended up coming off. And then when I went back on selection 3 years later, I was a senior diving instructor at the dive school down in Portsmouth. But I wanted to change. I didn't have the opportunity to go running up mountains because I was running courses and I didn't have as much time and things like that. So I sort of looked at my training before, what worked and what didn't. So when I was on selection before, I got quite big, I call them hill legs. I've got big quads and things like that. So walking up hills is not a problem with weight. But where I could gain time was running along the straights or running down hills, and that's what I needed to work on. So when I was running this course in the evening, I would just go on a spinner bike. Spinner bikes had started coming out. A spinner bike for 2 hours. So I had 2 hours with a Bergen on my back on a spinner bike, and I had two junior dive instructors who worked with me, Scouse McEverly and Webby, and they would do an hour each just to keep me entertained. But actually the spinning, obviously low impact, so it wasn't impacting my knee, but actually my CV came on leaps and bounds. And we did a BFT on the next course, and I came in 7 minutes 10. I was like, hang on, I'm like 28 years old. It's like as a sergeant, but it was that CV. And that was perfect then. I knew then I had the hill legs and I had the speed for selection.
Yeah. I know. I haven't spoke to Gareth Timmins, who was a commando before, and he was talking about taking Americans up Ben Nevis, just to break them. It was quite funny, talking about. It was actually funny talking to him. We were asking him about the difference between America and British militaries, and he was just saying, they used to take the Americans up there to break them, and they would say, "Why wouldn't you get a helicopter?" And that was kind of the difference. Why would you take a helicopter, you fucking idiot? And then, no, get your stuff on, let's go.
We got a different mindset. We just don't, we nickname the borrowers from them. We just borrow all their kit. They have all the assets that they probably don't need to do that. I remember one year when we had the foot and mouth in UK, they couldn't do selection. So they dwindled down a number of the candidates, and then they flew them out to America and did selection out there. And then the lads just smashed every record that they had in the US. So it's it's a different mindset. I know Delta Force and SEAL Team 6, they're tier 1. Their selection process is similar to ours now, which is good. But I think we just don't have the money that they have.
Yeah, well, that was essentially what Gareth Timmins had said. He said, he just said our guys are. He said hands down better. Then he kind of backtracked a little bit to make sure not to offend anybody, I think. But he was saying our guys are better because we don't have the kit.
Yeah,
that's what makes them better, which is quite. And interestingly, it's very difficult to get any UK we like speaking to military guys, and it's hard to get any UK guys on. And I don't know if it's they don't necessarily, special forces guys don't want to speak, or they don't like the limelight. I don't know why it is, but
we've struggled because as we've had half a dozen SEALs, a couple of US Green Berets. We've had Pat McNamara on.
Pat Mac, the friend of ours.
But we've half a dozen British military guys have messaged, and they've just said no, not interested.
And is that special forces guys? Is it?
Yeah.
Predominantly, and I don't know if that's what we're saying, if that's what the issue is. We've had a couple of Marines on, as I say, we've had Gareth Timmins on, we've had Mark Ormerod on. So Marines are normally all right. And we had Steele, the Magic Marine that was on Britain's Got Talent.
Yeah, well, he's the only one I know as Stott. He's the only I know, yeah. So, but the thing is, this is the thing, everyone has, when special forces gets thrown out quite a lot, actually. Especially in America, everyone's special forces. Actually a lot of people don't realize there's a tier process. So in the UK, we have the Marines and the Paras as tier 2. And then SAS and SBS are tier 1. And you'll tend to find it's probably them that you'll struggle to get on the show.
Right,
unless they already have a public profile. Whereas if you go to the US, SEALs, Green Berets, Rangers, they're tier 2. So your SEAL Team 6 in the Deltas, you would have the same problem there as well. So it's because Special Forces gets thrown out quite a lot, whereas here we like to call it elite forces, as your Marines and Paras, and your special forces. So it's a big distinction. So
that makes sense.
Everyone I bump into here is special forces.
Well, I used to. Sorry, you go, Dean.
No, or have served with them as well, and that's the different one. But I think for me, where I was quite not lucky, so. I sort of going back slightly. I was one of the first Army guys to go SBS. I wasn't a Royal Marine. I didn't go the normal route. And then obviously my time. Yeah, go on, mate.
So I was just going to say, I was going to ask you about that because I went down to Lumsden back in '99, ended up blowing out my ACR and LCL and taking a medical discharge. But at the time, it was only Royal Marines that could go into the SBS. And then when I was doing my research on you, I saw you were SBS, but were Army. So I was going to ask how that happened. So
so obviously, days of old, as you rightly pointed there, Royal Marines was 100% to the SBS, and then I would normally go SAS. I ended up going back down to Limson as an instructor on the All Arms Commando course, which is great. I really enjoyed my time there. And at the end, what had happened is basically they got to a point where the SBS were losing candidates to the SAS. So some of the Marines didn't like diving, so they would go SAS, but you couldn't do it the other way. So they sort of looked at it and said, well, look, let's open up tri-service as the SAS do. And in the Royal Engineers, we have 450 divers within the engineers. So so that's what they did. They opened the doors up tri-service. There was a course officer who used to come down at the end of the 30-miler with the All Arms. He would come and do a presentation on the SBS. So that's where I sort of saw the first presentation. And for me, it was just a natural fit. When I decided to go on selection, I did 8 years in Free Commander Brigade and 7 of them in Brigade Recce Force. And I then left and was now the senior dive instructor for the Army. So for me, it was the natural sort of progression. So much to the disgust of my friends in the SAS, I went that way. And me and one of the other lads, we were on the course past. And I think now 15% thereabouts, maybe a little bit more, are now from the army, which was good. So I did that. You know, I didn't go your normal traditional route, but then I left for a parachute injury and things like that. But sort of going back to your original question about being the public profile. So I got approached in 2015. Yeah, 2015 by Minnow Films, who were coming up with a concept called SAS Who Dares Wins. So one of the guys, Andrew Slater, who's another Scots guy from Aberdeen, he was a researcher. He rang me up and said, look, your name keeps coming up, you know, can we have a chat? So he flew up to Aberdeen and we sat down and he said, look, this is what we're looking at doing. This is the show. Your name's come up. Are you interested? I said, look, I'd be interested, and I can get you other guys on the show, but it needs to be cleared through the MOD. So in the Tier 1 Special Forces, we signed the Official Secrecy Act, and this is where you'll be having issues with certain guys, is you sign the Official Secrecy Act, which doesn't mean you can't talk about anything. There's just certain things you can't talk about. And so I said, look, it needs to be cleared by them before you go do this show, you know. So I got Ant and Foxy on the show. I introduced them to Minnow Films. A week later, the MOD wrote me a letter and said, look, you need to step away from this. I was like, I'm fine. You know, for me, at the time, I was working in the private security industry and things like that, and I needed to keep a low profile with some of the jobs that I was doing. So I stepped away, and they went on and did the show. And, you know, for me, it was like, I had visions of, there was a show called SAS Who Tough Enough. I thought it was going to be like that. And it, you know, they went on and did that, and they all then obviously got persona non gratis from the group. You know, you just don't do it unless it's been approved by the MOD. And so I, when I did my bike ride, you know, my profile then came out. I then had a public profile. So I've done it another way that I've managed to still stay on side with the MOD without upsetting them. So that's probably where you're probably going to hit hurdles with other potential Special Forces speakers, is the fact that they've signed the Official Secrecy Act, or they just still want to keep a low profile.
It makes sense, because we had that even with my pal Scott, didn't we, Chris?
Yeah.
Who was in the Marines. He stayed after I left out, and he's now working private security. And when we first launched this podcast, me and Chris were both lucky that we knew people in relatively interesting roles, like Chris knows Ian Mackey, the 100-meter sprinter that competed in Atlanta Olympics. We both knew like a couple of power lifters, and I knew Scott, so I thought I'll get Scott on. And he said exactly what you said, Dean. He's still working the private security. He's out somewhere at the moment doing it. And he was like, would it go on the internet? And I was like, well, yeah. And he's like, not willing to do it then, because it puts me at risk. It puts my team at risk. Could potentially put my family at risk back home. And I was like, totally respect that. You just have to. It's something that you don't really think about being on Civvy Street. That,
and actually,
you know, we just do a wee podcast.
Yeah, when you speak to the MOD and when you talk about, you know, you being a public figure, you know, they sort of highlight to you that they can't protect you anymore, or you and your family, because you're now out there in the domain. And that's what it is. They just want to protect you and your family as much as possible.
This is one of the things when I see now, you know, Who Dares Wins, all this kind of stuff is because of exactly what you've just said. You know, if you're a legitimate Special Forces guy, you know, at the highest level, you know, are those guys really doing that stuff? And the way I always think about it is, you know how you get like, remember the show Danny Dyer's Deadliest Men? And you used to watch it and go, like, before it, you know, no real hard man or no real deadly man is going to be on TV going, I'm a real hard man, because they wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? It's just, you know.
There's a fine line, you know. I don't watch the show. I've watched the first one. I was like, yeah, done. You know, there's a fine line between authenticity and entertainment. And to be honest, if you were to do a factual show on the normal selection, it'd be quite boring, you know, because there is no shouting, there is no cursing and things like that. They don't need to shout and curse. The course is hard enough itself. You can potentially fail yourself. So, you know, there is that element. I mean, obviously, you know, everyone thinks that's what it's like, and it's nothing like at all. But that's the show. And then some of the characters on there as well, their heads have got bigger than the show. So it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, I suppose it's too easy.
I was working in the security industry when I got injured out. So I had a parachuting injury from the special forces, and it was actually when I was exiting the aircraft. So we were jumping out at 15,000 feet on what was a hey-ho jump, high altitude, high opening. So the parachute opens straight away, and you travel up to 30 minutes or 50 kilometers to the target area. So we've done a few of these jumps. I've done hundreds of these jumps, but on this day we've done a few. And I exited the aircraft, and my leg got caught in the line above my head. And so I was trying to kick it out in time before the parachute had opened. But I couldn't open it. I couldn't kick it out in time, and my leg got ripped over my head and to the right. And same with yourself. I tore my ACL, my MCL, my lateral meniscus, my hamstring, my calf, and my quad as well. So also all the supporting muscles as well. So my first concern was, how was I going to land it? Because no one else in the team was aware there was a problem. 15,000 feet, you're on the limits of oxygen. So I was drifting in and out of consciousness and also vomiting because of the pain. But my first challenge was to land it. I landed it successfully, landed it one-legged actually. And then I remember shouting medic, and actually it was Ant Middleton was in a parachute next to me. He said, "That was good landing." I said, "Yeah, but the exit wasn't." So that was the end of my career. 16 years in the military, and then having grown up in and around the military. And then I went, without sounding like Liam Neeson, people with our skill sets, naturally progression is to go into the private security industry. And that's what I did. I didn't want to, a lot of my friends now had their own sort of maritime security companies, doing a lot of work off the east coast of Africa. I didn't want to sort of compete with them. I moved from Poole to Aberdeen, Alano's from Aberdeen. And so sort of went there, but within 48 hours, I was in Libya helping set up the DFID project, which was part of the British Embassy in Benghazi during the Arab Spring. And soon identified that, firstly, the Libyans didn't want it being another Afghan or Iraq when Gaddafi had fallen. And also that these larger security companies, these big players, were charging 6-7 figure sums for crisis management and evacuation plans, which weren't actually in place. So I flew home after a couple of weeks. Alana gave birth to our daughter, Molly, and I took our savings out of the bank, and I went back in and I bought 30 weapons on the black market, and I buried them between Tunis and Egypt, and just designed my own evacuation plans. Spent a month in the desert, putting these all together, comms kit, money, weapons and such. Went back out 6 months later, because obviously when I was burying them the first time round, there was a big shortage of ammunition because obviously the war was still going on. Checked that they were all there, and then I just sold that concept to the oil and gas sector, should they need evacuating from the air, the sea or the land, and just sat on it. I mean, in 2012, I'd just come back from the London Olympics, and I was in Benghazi the evening that the American ambassador got killed. They made a movie called 13 Hours. And, I got a phone call asking if I could help a German oil company get 8 of their engineers safely from Benghazi to Tripoli. And that's what I did. I got them back through safe houses that I had in the desert. And then 2 years later, I got a phone call from the Canadian embassy. I was now in Brazil covering the World Cup. And there was a thing called the Tripoli War, which is a civil war between the militias and the government. And they said, "Look, your name's come up. Can you help us?" So I went back in, and their close protection team weren't even allowed to leave their accommodation. So I did all the planning, spoke to all the tribal elders, and then we single-handedly evacuated the Canadian embassy, 18 military and 4 diplomats from Libya to Tunis. And so there was those sort of jobs I was doing at the time when Channel 4 were coming to me, and it just didn't fit the profile of me smuggling people across borders while I'm all over Channel 4. So that was what I was doing in the security industry. And then I came back from that trip, and my wife had highlighted I'd only been home 21 days in a 365-day calendar. And so something had to change. So I hung up my security boots and started working with my wife, who's very entrepreneurial. And at this time, she was a property developer in Aberdeen. I don't know if you know Aberdeen well. Do you know Peter Cooter? It's about
yeah.
I know Peter. Yeah.
So we were living in Peter Cooter. So during this period, it's probably about 5 years now after leaving the military, my injured leg was 2 kilos lighter than my good leg. And so I just bought a push bike off Amazon and just cycled to and from the office. Bought a cyclocross actually because of the big potholes in Aberdeen. I thought a road bike would be getting buckled quite easy. And just cycling to and from the office, you know, it wasn't big miles, about 8 miles there, 8 miles back. Felt a lot better again being active because I sort of lost that identity with my injury. And so my wife, you know, can imagine me sat in these architects and planners meetings. I was like, not really interested in anything you got to say. It was more the coffee and the biscuits. And my wife was running the business anyway. So she could see that glaze over my eyes and said, right, you need to do something. So it was a month before my 40th birthday. And I was getting ground rush, being a middle-aged man and panicking. What have I done with my life? You know what I mean? What's my legacy? And so I said, I fancy doing a world record. And so I was thinking,
as you do.
Yeah. She said, well, what in? I said, well, something physically active. I said, well, cycling's good because it's not impacting my knee. Why don't we do that? I'm thinking more maybe Aberdeen to Fife and return. And my wife then found the world's longest road, which runs from southern Argentina to northern Alaska. So it's the equivalent of cycling from London to Sydney and then 4,000 miles. It's that far. So having only cycled 20 miles, that's what I did. Sounds quite arrogant. I applied for the world record for the world's longest road. And 6 weeks later, Guinness came back, said, yes, you've been successful on your application. So that's how I sort of transitioned from the security world into the world that I'm sort of in at the moment, although I am still doing a bit of security in the background.
Is it true as well? I don't know whether this is one of these internet things that I read when I was looking you up, Dean, but you'd planned it for 110 days, I believe, and you did it in the 100 because you needed to get back for a certain wedding. Is that true?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, so when I was doing the,
I love that. Right, lads, that's the most British military thing ever. Right, lads, we'll have to chap on here. I need to get home. Okay.
Actually, yeah, we're going back slightly, so and to give the audience a bit more an idea about the challenge. So I've done a lot of charity work anyway. Me and my wife still do a lot of charity work. So I was an ambassador for the SBS Association. I'm an ambassador for the British Legion. I've done a lot of stuff before. So I'm going to massively name drop now. So Prince Harry and I known each other about 14 years. We met each other on a military training course and we just maintained friendship ever since. You know, he used to come to events that I would run. I'd go to some of his events, did everything very low key under the radar. So I rang him up when Guinness had come back and said, yes, you've been successful. I said, look, I'm going to cycle the world's longest road. You know, what should we do it for? And this was 2016. So him, his brother and Kate were running just about to launch a campaign called Heads Together, which was, the focus was mental health. And I'd seen the effects of mental health within the military, but not seen how it affected the whole of society. So I said, yeah, let's do it for that. So that was the campaign. I set a target of £1 million and we now had the challenge. So that was what was going on in the background. Him and I did a promo video together to help promote the challenge. And this is where my profile then, being Special Forces, then goes public. You know, but the military were fully behind it. The SF community were behind us a lot. You know, you're promoting, you know, a great cause. As long as you keep doing it, things like that, it's not a problem. So yeah, as you're right, you touched on, the world record was 100. Well, when I applied for the world record, it was 125 days. And then 6 weeks later, when Guinness came back, it had already been beaten by 8 days. It was now 117 days of that. Bloody hell. So my target was 117 days. And when I was doing the planning element of it, I know I wasn't a cyclist. I just knew that military style sort of meticulous planning and detail, you know, put into this. I just took a military set of orders and just crossed out ammunition. And I was looking at all the potential contingencies, the actions on issues that could happen on the challenge. And there was things that you could factor, but there was stuff that was out of your control, be it natural disasters, coups, third-party influence. So should I encounter any of that, I didn't want it eaten into my record. So although the world record was 117 days, I set a target of 110 days. So should we encounter that, it was eaten into that week and not into my target. And as you rightly said, I did South America. The world record was 58 days. I took 10 days off the South America world record and then got into North America on day 70. So I was now 14 days ahead of my target record. And so I was perfect. I can take a day's rest here or there if need be. And then my wife, who was the campaign director, she was running all the project around me. She'd rang me at 5 missed calls after an hour getting into America. So my initial, she doesn't ring me unless it's very important. So my initial concern was my children. I thought there was something wrong. Yeah. I got off the bike and I spoke to her and she said, look, what do you wear to a royal wedding? I was like, sorry. She goes, we've been invited to Harry and Meghan's wedding. I was like, okay. She goes, no, you don't understand. She goes, for you to get back for this wedding, you need to be finished by day 102, which is 15 days ahead of the world record. So going into the phone call, I was 14 days ahead. 10 minutes later, I'm now a day behind. So it didn't matter what I'd done before me. I'm now behind my new target. So I then got to Lubbock in Texas the next day, and we had 60-mile-an-hour winds and tornadoes. And I was now grounded for another 24 hours. And so I'm 2 days behind. So I just took pen to paper. There's an app on your phone called Windy TV, which gives you the strengths and directions of the winds forecasted for the next 2 weeks every hour. But it's about 95% accurate. So I just made a plan. I had to cycle 340 miles in the next 36 hours to miss the next weather window. And I just played chess with Mother Nature through North America, majority of the cycling at night. Used it to my advantage as well. Got a lovely tailwind in Cheyenne, and I cycled 260 miles in 11 hours with 10,000 feet of climbing. So I'd gained that time up now. I got to Canada and I was a week outside and I thought, perfect. The world record's done. I'm going to be back in time for this royal wedding. But then this gentleman had just come out on social media that day. I'm a novice cyclist and he was a professional. He's already got 3 other endurance world records. It was in his mid-20s, sponsored by Red Bull, all the big brands. And he'd announced that he was going to cycle the Pan American Highway in August and be the first man to do it under 100 days. I was like, great. So the challenge, the dynamics of the challenge changed again for me. I wasn't comfortable in just smashing the world record and being back for the wedding. I wanted to give it my all and see if I could get in under the 100 days. So I cycled for 22 hours in the last 30 hours in minus 18 and came in 99 days, 12 hours and 56 minutes. So it wasn't the original plan. The original plan was anything better than 117 days. And here we were now trying to go sub 100. But I think for me, I was in a position, thankfully, when the information came to me, I was in a good position that I could act on it. I was already well ahead of my target. If I'd known about that at the start, the royal wedding or even this other guy, it may have been too much. But in 99 days, I had 5 days off, 3 due to weather and 2 due to logistics. So I would have had that little bit of fun. So you never know, but it's just how it panned out. But I talk about how important it was, the planning. That was important, but actually the success of this challenge was being reactive to the plan changing on the ground. That was the success of this, not actually, from the original plan to where we were was night and day. Even to the last 24 hours, the plan was changing.
You have to on those things. I mean, you'd have to. Just to give you what day is this? Monday. So yesterday I was in Torridon cycling. So I've got the Keltman Extreme Iron Distance Triathlon in June. So I went up Saturday night, stayed, and then I did a little bit of cycle route. And I made a mistake, ridiculously, around about that area. There's 2 towns called Shieldaig. Right. So on the way back, the loop back, I seen a sign for Shieldaig. I went, oh, this must be another way. I'll go this way and find my way to Torridon. Yeah. I only added on an extra 10 miles.
Yeah.
But when you've planned out how much calories and how much water to take per hour, and you add an extra 10 miles into something, all of a sudden then it was really quite warm. It was about 18 degrees, which is ridiculous in Scotland. And because in the morning it was freezing cold, I had a mid-layer kind of Berghaus fleece on. By this time I was sweating, had nowhere to put it. And then you're 10, short on food and water. So I was getting crazy cramps in my left hammy. I was getting insane cramps because I dried out so much, didn't have enough water and salt. And you think that's on 71 miles.
Yeah,
so to do that for the length of time that you were doing it, you think, like, there's so many things you would have to change almost hour by hour. It's insane.
Everything was changing. You know, I got food poisoning twice in Peru. I crashed my bike in Chile. Got knocked off my bike in Colombia. You know, there's so many other factors. You know, you can make a plan, but it's going to change. As long as you are aware of it. You know, I say you can't control the uncontrollables. You know, just go with it. Just go with whatever's happening for you that day. So, yeah, it worked out 94 days cycling, which was 147 miles a day for 94 days.
I know.
That's so. We did last year in April, I think it's just over a year ago we did it. I know that because I came on Facebook recently. We did there's an app for your phone called Sufferfest, where you do, the app. So you can do I think there's 10 videos you do, and you become a knight of Sufferlandria. It's just a nonsense thing, but it's quite difficult. So I did that. It was 11 hours on the bike one day, and I couldn't get off the bike. I was just like, holy, I can't get up, and my legs. And you're thinking, how do you do that for 100 days?
That's what I was going to say, because it's probably doable, as you say, doing 120 miles in a day, full stop.
Yeah.
Not for 100 days plus, and as you say, knocking out 340 odd miles in 36 hours. That's
insane.
You can't. Before I'd even gone out there, I'd never cycled 150 miles in a one. I'd done 10 hours on a watt bike at altitude, just to simulate altitude that I know that I could cycle at altitude, because I had to look at the climates and the conditions that I was going through. The great thing about this challenge, which I really loved, was the fact it's got all the weather systems. You're going from the southern point of Argentina to northern Alaska. So it went from plus 47 degrees in the driest non-popular desert in Chile to minus 18. You had the 100% humidity in Central America. You had the altitude, in the Tour de France, depending on what route they do each year, it ranges between 21 and 23 kilometers, their biggest climb. My biggest climb was 67 kilometers from sea level to 4,500 meters in a day. So it just blew whatever we had here. So to replicate the heat, I flew out to Dubai and did heat training for 2 weeks. To replicate the altitude, I went into the altitude center. I did Lanzan Groats twice, just as a training rides. It sounds really arrogant. Training ride. Because you can't replicate a challenge like that. You can't go do anything like it. So for me, it's always, the first week is always going to be hard, however fit you are. But once you've got past that first week, then your body knows what it's asking of it. So for me, I wasn't doing big miles at the beginning, but when it got to, Peru about 3 or 4 weeks later, and even though when I got food poisoning, I was still, anything less than 150 miles wasn't enough for me, because physically and mentally I was getting stronger. And also I had a lovely tailwind through Peru. I'd spoken to the previous record holders, and they all started in Alaska and finished in Argentina. So when I was doing my research and having spoken with them, all their issues were in South and Central America. So I thought, as a military man, or not even just a military man, I just thought common sense. Why not address those issues early? Why not get South and Central America out of the way? And then once you're in North America, your issues should all be left behind you. So that's what I did. I turned it on its head. Just because they went that way didn't mean it was the right way. And I decided to start from Argentina. And from a cycling perspective, it was great. I had a tailwind all the way through Peru. And when you get a tailwind, that's 2,500 kilometers of tailwind. So you're gaining some really good time. And one thing that really surprised me on the challenge was the road conditions. I talk about Aberdeen getting a cyclocross because of the potholes. In South America, there was my bike was an Orbea Terra, so it was an all-road bike. So it had the clearance for larger tires and then your slick road tires. So other than a 10-kilometer stage between Argentina and Chile border, the rest was just slick road tires. The road surfaces were amazing, and that's where I gained a lot of time. And then the next time I put on gravel tires was the last 400 miles, Dalton's Highway in Alaska, where they film ice truckers. The rest of it was just, was slicks. So that caught me out. Yeah.
One of the things that I have to ask you, everybody else doesn't have to listen to this, but how do you feel for that? That's something that I'm interested in. How do you feel yourself? Are you going on, calories per hour or carbs per hour, or how are you taking food in?
I wasn't, I started cycling at 40. So, we were chatting to the likes of these SIS and Talk and all these lot, but, I approached Ginsters first. I just eat what I like to eat. I did the Prudential 100 down in London, and I had 2 Ginsters and 2 Greggs sausage rolls hanging out my back. I'm too old to be trying these gels and things like that. And your body won't be able to, for 100+ days, you'd end up being sick. So you just need to eat what you can. I was burning between 9,000 and 12,000 calories a day. Your body can only consume 7,000 through food. The rest has to come through drinks and shakes and things like that. So my wife was making all sorts. She ended up training up as a sports nutritionist and giving me all these plans and ideas. But actually, throw the plans out the window. When you get out there, it's whatever's available. So when I was in southern Argentina, it was ham and cheese baguette or cheese and ham, whichever way you looked at it. And then I got to Chile, and it was chicken and rice. But thankfully, we could stock up at service stations and buy pasta in the evening. But we had to approach it almost as a polar expedition. You would be losing weight from day you start to the day you finish. So I started cycling. I weighed 90 kilos. Everyone's like, you don't look like a cyclist. But for me, I wanted to keep the weight on in the timber. And then the first week is always going to be hard. And then you start shedding that weight, getting fitter. But to keep on top of that, I broke the cycling. I didn't look at the 14,000 miles. I didn't look at that, because if you look at that, you wouldn't even get on the flight. How do I break that out into manageable bite sizes? So I broke it into countries, broke the countries into days, and the days into 4 stages. And so I had to have a big breakfast, and then all I would do is just cycle as fast as I could for 2 hours. I then got off the bike for 30 minutes, had food and water, but I was very disciplined in my timings. It was 30 minutes and I was back on the bike. I wasn't having a selfie with a llama. I wasn't chatting to anyone else on the side of the road. And then I would just look at the next 2 hours. I wouldn't look at the afternoon or the next day. So for me, it was just 4 training rides a day, 4 2-hour training rides a day. And then as I got fitter, I was banging in the bigger miles.
Yeah, I did that with marathons. Not that I'm a marathon. I'm like you. I'm 100 kilos. So I'm not built to do any of that stuff. But what I tried to do with marathons in the end was, instead of saying I'm running a marathon, just kind of go, oh, I've got 4 10Ks and then a 2-mile run. Yeah. And then it becomes like, oh, that's all right.
Yeah.
That's not terrible. Yeah.
You need to in mind, but you also need to make, for me on this challenge, I also made sure that I was on target at the end of the day. You see people, I see people doing their challenges and like, well, I'm 10 miles behind today, but I'll catch that up tomorrow. But you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. You could have another bad day and maybe 20 or 30 miles behind. And that starts playing with your head then, especially at night when you've got a bit of free time. If you finish, that's why I always say, stay on the bike 30, 45 minutes till you hit your target, because then you're in a good headspace going into the next day, knowing that you where you should be. I think after the first week, we had really strong winds the first week, and I was 39 miles behind target, but my target was still a week ahead of the world record. And then from then on, it was all gains, and I was never. So I was quite lucky that I was never behind target or touch and go. It was always go.
So just because you touched on the royalty, how is Harry? Is a cool guy?
Yeah, he's a cool guy. Yeah. So I came back from the bike ride, and 2 days later was the royal wedding. I was still getting used to having my family around me, never mind the world's press, because I hadn't really been following the royal wedding. And unfortunately, not unfortunately at all, but I did an amazing feat. We raised over £900,000 for mental health. We smashed 2 world records. And the first question I got when I got back to Aberdeen was, how was the wedding? I was like, really? It just overshadowed anything I'd done. So I wish I'd had at least a week or 2 to appreciate what I'd done before that. But yeah, no, he's really good. And as you see, he's very much a great ambassador for the veteran community, does a lot of philanthropy work. And, we're still very much in contact. And, obviously that's probably one of the reasons I'm here in California, when I realized that he was here as well. So, moving forward, my book Relentless came out, and, everyone was like, amazing endurance feat, blah, blah, blah. But you are the security guru. Why are you still not in that arena? So that's what I'm doing. I've set up a security company over here, very low profile, working with some ultra high net worths, but still want to push myself, push my boundaries, and help.
What's next? You got any other crazy world record things that you want to try?
Yeah. So obviously the two questions after the bike ride, first was how was the royal wedding, and the second one, what was next? So my USP, I take a sport or discipline I've never done before. So I've enjoyed cycling, and I've cycled the world's longest road. So next year, 1st of February, I set off. I'm kayaking the world's longest river, which has never been done before, from source to sea, the River Nile in Rwanda to Egypt, 4,280 miles. So cycled the world's longest road, paddled the world's longest river. There's obviously a theme there, something that's working. And just take all my experiences from before and put it in that. The campaign for mental health was great for the bike ride. This one, we're going to focus a bit on modern slavery, human trafficking, poverty, pollution, sustainability, conservation. There's so many things we can talk about on the Nile. So I didn't want to just channel myself down one avenue with one cause. So we'll do quite a bit.
As you get sort of your public profile gets bigger, and you're doing something like this, do you start to do people approach you about doing kind of like a documentary following it, or a program to follow it or anything? Because I think that would be awesome. Like I would watch that. I don't watch a lot of TV, but to watch somebody go through the highs and lows of doing, what do you say, 4,000?
Yeah, I think the bike ride was almost my CV. You imagine me trying to get sponsorship for that. Never cycled before, going to cycle the world's longest road and raise £1 million. And that, because it was such a success, and it's a lot easier now. And but we have a documentary footage from the last one. We've archived that, and we were going to potentially use it. And we're going to do 6-episode documentary on this one. So there will be a documentary on this. So whether we mix in the bike ride with this or do 2 series, we're not too sure.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Because the best thing is we marinated that rather than launching it out straight away. I think now we've got a better message. So my son's going to disturb us now on this podcast.
That's all right. That's all right.
I love it.
Here we go.
That's fine. That's all right. I think we must be getting close to an hour anyway, are we?
We've just gone over there, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
We'll start winding it down anyway.
It's always so easy when somebody comes on and just talks. It's like I don't have to do it, but you can tell you obviously do quite a bit of talking because you're very, very good at it.
Yeah, well, I never, like I said, I didn't look beyond the bike ride. That's one of the things that caught me out. We did it, so I wasn't smuggling people across borders. I didn't see a career in guest speaking or book opportunities and things like that. So naturally, I enjoy speaking, or I'm a good speaker anyway, because probably from my time in the military, being an instructor, I was confident talking in front of people I don't know anyway. So so that's always helped. My wife always says, "Oh, you get paid to talk about yourself. Who wouldn't enjoy that?" So, but
but no, it's been great. It's been really interesting. That there's so many things that I could quite easily double back on, but maybe if you're back in Scotland at some point, we'll do one in person. We'll get in a little studio and do one properly.
We will. We would always do episode 2, maybe post Nile or
definitely.
Whenever.
Yeah, definitely. And that'd be awesome. There's so many things I could double back on there. There's so many interesting little things I could go off on, but
we only just scraped the surface. We'll do another episode.
Definitely. What we'll do is we'll start winding down, let you get away, Dean. But just for anyone that is interested in following you or finding out more about your journeys and your expeditions, where can we send them on the social media or the internet so they can find out more about you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Dean Stott and Facebook. Twitter's at Dean Stott SBS. I'm a bit new to Twitter. And if you go to my website, www.deanstott.com, there'll be a lot of stuff getting posted up on there. The now stuff we're just about to launch, and we'll push forward on the social media campaign there. This time around be very different from the bike ride. So when I did the bike ride, social media was a taboo to me, so I wasn't really comfortable in talking about it. Whereas I now know it's a platform to promote your message. So this time around, we'll be filming the training and all sorts.
It was actually
awesome.
Just because you're talking about the platform of it, we were speaking to CG Ortiz last time out, who does the podcast with Pat McNamara. And he's a brilliant marker at understanding how to get the best out of the whole thing. I'll have to listen back to his one to kind of understand how to get the best out of these things. But yeah, if you use them right, there could be a huge tool. So, but yeah, I mean, thanks for your time. I think we should let you get to the kids and enjoy your afternoon over there in
Cheerios, nothing exciting.
Well, let's call that episode 65 of the Silly Goose Gang podcast with Dean Stott. Let's call it done and dusted. Dean, it's been a real pleasure, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate having me.
The Silly Goose Gang podcast.